This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard, but didn't. If you were mad about the AIG bonus fiasco, just wait until you hear who else is getting bailout money. Congratulations to the American taxpayer for settling your lawsuit this week. Can't afford a new car? The government just used your tax dollars to buy $18,000 to prop up American automakers. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, April 12, 2009. Before we begin, we wanted to point out that we'll post links to news sources for each story in the video description section to your right. Because we have limited airtime in our news broadcast, these links will allow those interested to get additional details on each story. Now on to the news. We recognize that some of the stories we report can make your blood boil. If you have a heart condition or high blood pressure, then you may want to consult your physician before watching, because the stories this week may even make the apathetic throw their computer across the room. Settle in and take a deep breath. Remember a few weeks ago how the AIG $150 million bonus scandal made this nation boil over in anger? How do you feel about $400 million of bailout money going to three of the chief culprits of this economic collapse? Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch Rating Services are positioned to make hundreds of millions from the government bailout. These firms were one of the direct causes of this economic collapse because they issued AAA ratings on toxic mortgage-backed securities. Prior to the onset of the crisis in 2007, these rating firms stated that securities made from loans to borrowers who had either bad credit, unverified income, nothing down, interest-only payments, or all of the above, were better than holding cash. The AAA ratings doled out by these firms meant that the mortgages in these securities were extremely unlikely to default and therefore very low-risk investments. So all the hedge funds, pension funds, and institutional funds invested other people's money in what they justified as low-risk investments because Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch rated them AAA. The meltdown began when borrowers started defaulting on mortgages in 2007, and these securities became almost worthless. Banks wrote off losses, insurers like AIG had to pay off credit default swaps, and, well, you know the rest of the implosion details. If these firms had rated these securities as the junk they were, then the real estate bubble would not have been so massive. So why will these three firms, who were chiefly responsible for the collapse, receive up to $400 million of bailout money? These same three agencies will be providing security ratings for TALF, which stands for Term Asset-Backed Securities Loan Facility. The following will be a little complicated but necessary. TALF, created by the Federal Reserve, supports the issuance of securities backed by student loans, auto loans, credit card loans, and loans guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. Very similar to mortgage-backed securities. The Federal Reserve will lend $1 trillion to holders of certain AAA-rated asset-backed securities made up of recently originated consumer and small business loans. In order to qualify for Federal Reserve money, a security must be rated AAA and very unlikely to default. The Federal Reserve is responsible for the program's criteria, including who may participate and what types of assets and securities are eligible. Because Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's are the only credit raters that meet the Federal Reserve's criteria, the requirement effectively shuts out their competitors. So the $400 million in fees for rating services will go to these three agencies, the same firms who were the primary contributors of the collapse in the first place. And the $1 trillion in public funds will go to those who Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's deem worthy of AAA ratings. Americans are being played for fools. You'll be happy to know that you, the taxpayer, were able to settle a lawsuit that you probably didn't even know you were party to. The case dates back to the dot-com bubble. The class action lawsuit is against Wall Street firms JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, AIG, and Morgan Stanley. Class action lawyers claimed that the dot-com stocks were marketed at inflated prices and the compensation to Wall Street firms were hidden from investors. The investment banks agreed to pay $586 million while denying any wrongdoing. Since these investment banks are still funded with billions of taxpayer dollars, the U.S. taxpayer has effectively been made to pay for this settlement. This case dates back over 8 years and was finally settled when taxpayer funding was readily available. The executives at banks who got bonuses during the internet boom and shareholders who got dividends effectively avoided any responsibility. Government for the elite, of the elite, and by the elite. Feeling a little left out? When it comes to U.S. auto manufacturers, the government can not only claim that they are the biggest investor, but they are also their biggest customer. The government will use $285 million of economic stimulus funds to purchase a total of 17,600 vehicles by June 1st from Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors. Well, it's better than giving the cash directly to these failing companies. At least the taxpayers get something out of it. In exchange for bailing out Wall Street firms, the government received preferred stock in participating companies. It's not widely known that the government decides on when the companies can return the funds and buy back their stock. Even if the company wishes to pay back the Treasury can refuse to sell. This kind of control is unprecedented in our nation's history. The Treasury Department refuses to disclose whether any company has been denied the request to return funds they received under the Troubled Asset Relief Program. The silence out of Washington on what is happening with the public's money is deafening. One of our first stories in the fall of 2008 was about the second wave of foreclosures starting in late spring of this year. This aftershock to the subprime meltdown will run through 2012 and will consist of prime borrowers. Between government intervention and the recent change in mark-to-market rules, the stock market has seen a rally of over 20% in the last month. This will not last long as foreclosures start to accelerate again due to prime loan defaults. This chart, which we reported on back in the fall of 2008, shows that we have as many foreclosures ahead of us as we have behind us. Each bar represents the dollar amount of home loans where the interest rate adjusts upward during a given month. The higher the bar on the chart, the more loans that will see monthly payment increases. Higher interest rates, higher mortgage payments. Higher mortgage payments, higher number of foreclosures. This section here shows the subprime loan interest rate adjustments that caused all the borrowers to default in 2007 and 2008. As you can see in this section, there are almost as many prime loans that adjust over the next few years as there were in 2007 and 2008. This time it may be worse as unemployment has doubled and banking capital is basically depleted to the point where there's very little capability to write down more losses. But don't worry, the Federal Reserve has lots of ink and the printing presses are just getting warmed up. A few weeks ago, we did a story on Google's growing control over all things data. One of the aspects of the story was their interest in data mining the smart power grid. This is where the electrical system to your home is wired for communication feeding information back to a data monitoring company like Google. This past week, former national security officials said that there are frequent cyber attacks on the U.S. electrical system. The hacks into the electrical grid leave behind software that can be used to disrupt the system. China, Russia, as well as other countries have been the source of attacks. Investigators cannot say whether these attacks are government-sponsored or by independent individuals. Just what we needed, one more thing to worry about. Thanks for joining us this week. You may ask, okay, what do I do with this news you just gave me? Americans need to be informed about the news we cover. Only then will effective politicians be elected to office. We have created Informed Citizen News to make it easy for people to get the real news. We need your help in spreading the word about us. Send our link to your family and friends. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, have a great week.